Who comes to mind when you think of Russia's richest family? The Putins? Think again. This video exposes the true titans of Russian wealth, a family so powerful and secretive that their name might surprise you. We'll take you on an exclusive tour of their lavish lifestyle, from their fleet of supercars to their sprawling estates. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly who's sitting at the pinnacle of Russian luxury, from meat to millions. You've heard of tech billionaires, but what about meat magnates? One Russian family turned pork into profit, building an empire that could feed a small nation. How'd they go from state-owned scraps to a billion-dollar buffet? Enter the Mikhailov family, sitting pretty on a cool $1.1 billion fortune, all thanks to their meat empire, Cherkizovo Group. These folks ain't just flipping burgers. We're talking about a meat production scale that's off the charts. Cherkizovo pumps out enough pork to hypothetically feed a small country. That's a lot of bacon, my friends. But here's where it gets juicy. The Mikhailovs didn't inherit this meat mountain. Nah, they built it from the ground up during the Wild West days of Russian privatization in the 90s. When the government was selling off state-owned assets, these savvy business folks saw an opportunity and grabbed it by the horns. Now you might be thinking, who's running this pork powerhouse? Well, it's a family affair, with Mama Bear Lydia Mikhailova holding the biggest slice of the pie, 29.5% of the shares. The rest? Divided up between her two sons and niece. Talk about keeping it in the family. But Lydia ain't exactly flipping patties in the kitchen. Nah, she's living it up in Europe, enjoying the fruits of her ex-husband, Igor Babayev's labor. He's the guy who got the ball rolling back in the day, turning a state-owned meat factory into a money-making machine. Now you might be wondering, is there any competition in the Russian meat market? Oh boy, is there ever. Enter Viktor Linik, the big cheese behind Miratorg, another meat giant. This dude's famous for saying the public should be thinking about their country's development, not about Jamin and Parmesan. Shots fired in the meat wars, folks, pigging out on profits. While some billionaires are known for their tech empires, others are making bank in a more meaty way. What if I told you there's a Russian family that started with a few pigs and ended up with enough pork to feed every McDonald's in the country for a year? Meet the Liniks, the kingpins of Russian pork. The Linik family's sitting on a cool $1.35 billion, and it's all thanks to their company Miratorg. These folks ain't just running a little pig farm. They're the biggest pork producers in all of Russia. We're talking about a meat empire that'd make even the Mikhailovs raise an eyebrow. But here's where it gets wild. The Linik brothers, Victor and Alexander, didn't inherit this pork powerhouse. Nah, they built it from scratch back in 1995. At first, they were just importing beef and pork from Latin America. But these guys had bigger dreams. They saw an opportunity to dominate the domestic market, and boy, did they go whole hog. Now, Miratorg ain't just big, it's massive. The Linik family's got so much agricultural land across Russia, you'd need a private jet just to see it all in a day. We're talking about enough land to make some small countries jealous. And all that land, it's pumping out pork like there's no tomorrow. But the Liniks ain't just about quantity, they're playing the long game. In 2019, Viktor Linik made some waves when he proposed banning folks from bringing meat products from abroad. Sounds crazy, right? But think about it. If you can't bring in foreign meat, who you gonna buy from? That's right, Miratorg. And get this, the Russian government's been giving them a helping hand. They've got these policies to cut down on foreign meat imports. And guess who's reaping the benefits? Yep, our pork-producing pals, the Liniks. Now you might be wondering, how much pork are we really talking about here? Well, let's put it this way. If you lined up all the pigs Miratorg produces in a year, they'd probably stretch from Moscow to St. Petersburg. That's a lot of bacon, folks. Ensuring their wealth. From pork to property, Russia's billionaires know how to diversify. But what if I told you one family turned insurance policies into a Hollywood-worthy real estate empire? The Sarkisovs ain't just writing policies. They're living large in Monaco mansions and LA penthouses that'd make movie stars jealous. Meet the Sarkisov family, sitting pretty on a $1.7 billion fortune. These folks didn't strike it rich with tech or oil. They built their empire on insurance. Yeah, you heard that right. Insurance. But we're not talking about your run-of-the-mill car policies here. The Sarkisov brothers, Sergei and Nikolai, own a whopping 60.6% stake in Riso Garantia, one of Russia's biggest insurance companies. And they've got some international muscle too. France's AXA holds a 36.7% stake in the company. That's like having a French supermodel as your business partner. But here's where it gets wild. The Sarkisovs took their insurance money and went on a global shopping spree. They've got luxury properties that'll make your jaw drop. We're talking mansions in Monaco, 3 houses in Los Angeles, a fancy pad in London, and get this, a castle in France. A freaking castle. These guys are living like modern-day royalty. Now, you might be thinking, sure, they've got some nice houses, so what? But we're not just talking about any old properties here. The Sarkisovs are playing in the big leagues. Their real estate portfolio is so baller, they're rubbing shoulders with Hollywood A-listers. We're talking properties worth as much as your favorite movie star's mansion. But the Sarkisovs ain't just about flashy homes. They're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Their real estate game is all about combining luxury living with serious financial returns. It's like they've cracked the code on how to live like kings while making their money work for them. And get this, Sergei Sarkisov ain't just a businessman. He's got a background in diplomacy, serving as the Armenian consul general in Los Angeles. Talk about connections. This guy's probably got more strings to pull than a puppet master, banking on success. What if you could turn a gas company job into control of Hungary's biggest bank? That's exactly what the Rakimkulovs did, and now they're sitting on $1.8 billion. The Rakimkulov family ain't playing around when it comes to investments. These folks took their Russian gas money and turned it into a Hungarian empire. We're talking about a fortune that'd make some small countries jealous. So how'd they do it? It all started with Papa Bear Megdet Rakimkulov. This guy was running Gazprom's subsidiary in Hungary, and he saw an opportunity. Instead of just cashing his paycheck, he used his earnings to buy up shares in Hungarian companies. Smart move, right? But Megdet didn't stop there. He went big, real big. The Rakimkulovs now own a huge chunk of OTP Bank, one of Hungary's largest financial institutions. It's like they've got their fingers in every money pie in the country. And get this, they ain't just about banking. The Rakimkulovs also have major investments in MOL, Hungary's leading gas company. Talk about diversifying your portfolio. These folks are playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Now, you might be thinking, sure, they've got some investments, so what? But we're not just talking about a few stocks here and there. The Rakimkulovs' investment strategy is like a high-stakes poker game. They've placed massive bets on foreign banks and energy companies. It's a risky move, but so far, it's paying off big time. Megdet Rakimkulov was once the richest resident of Hungary. Yeah, you heard that right. A Russian guy was the wealthiest person in an entire foreign country. That's like being the best surfer in Switzerland. Unexpected, but impressive. The Rakimkulovs' success shows just how wild the world of Russian billionaires can be. These folks saw opportunities abroad and jumped on them faster than a cat on a mouse. It's like they looked at the changing economic conditions in Russia and said, nah, we're gonna make our own rules. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Rakimkulovs aren't just throwing money around, they're strategic, they're calculated, they're playing the long game. By investing in banks and energy companies, they've positioned themselves at the heart of Hungary's economy. From black gold to platinum, the Gutseriev family swapped their oil fields for precious metals, and now they're not just rich, they're owning a luxury resort in Sardinia. Rich. How'd they pull off this glittering transformation? The Gutseriev family's sitting on a cool $1.9 billion, and it's all thanks to their clever pivot from oil to precious metals. These folks ain't just digging for gold, they're mining platinum too. It's like they looked at their oil wells and said, nah, let's go for something shinier. But here's where it gets wild. The Gutseriev brothers, who are of Chechen origin, ain't just playing around in their backyard. They're developing platinum deposits in Krasnoyarsk territory and the Far East. And if that ain't enough, they've got a gold deposit in Kyrgyzstan too. Talk about spreading your bets. Now you might be thinking, sure, they've got some mines, so what? But we're not just talking about a few holes in the ground here. The Gutseriev shift from oil to precious metals is like a high-stakes game of resource monopoly. They're trading in their oil fields for properties that literally shine. But the Gutseriev ain't just about digging up shiny rocks. These folks know how to live it up too. In 2014, they dropped a cool 180 million euros on the Forte Village luxury resort in Sardinia. That's right, they bought an entire resort. It's like they looked at a regular vacation and said, nah, let's buy the whole place. And get this, One of the Bajayev brothers, Mavlit, along with his son Mansur, is also investing in real estate in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. It's like they're playing real-life Monopoly, but instead of Park Place and Boardwalk, they're buying up chunks of Europe. The Bajayevs' story shows just how wild the world of Russian billionaires can be. These folks saw the writing on the wall for oil and jumped ship to precious metals faster than you can say gold rush. It's like they looked at the changing market conditions and said, "We're gonna make our own luck." Systema's survivors. How do you stay a multi-billionaire when the government's playing tug-of-war with your assets? The Yevtushenkovs have that down to a science. Meet the Yevtushenkov family, sitting on a $2.3 billion fortune. These folks ain't just rich, they're lose billions and shrug it off rich. Their main moneymaker, AFK Systema, a company that's got its fingers in everything from telecoms to agriculture. But here's the kicker. The Yevtushenkovs have been through some serious financial storms. We're talking about the kind of losses that'd make most people curl up in a ball and cry. But these guys, they just dust themselves off and keep on trucking. Back in 2014, Vladimir Yevtushenkov, the family patriarch, got hit with a major setback. The Russian government seized Bashneft, an oil company that was the crown jewel of AFK Systema. We're talking about an asset worth billions, just gone like that. Most people would be done after a hit like that, but not the Yevtushenkovs. Instead of throwing in the towel, they doubled down on their other investments. It's like they were playing a game of financial Jenga, pulling out one big block, but keeping the whole tower standing. They focused on their telecom business, MTS, and their other ventures in real estate and healthcare. Now, you might be thinking, sure, they bounced back, but how much did they really lose? Well, get this. Vladimir Yevtushenkov's net worth took a nosedive from $9 billion to $1.3 billion after the Bashneft seizure. That's like losing 85% of your wealth overnight. For most of us, that'd be game over. But for the Yevtushenkovs, it was just a bump in the road. And they ain't done yet. The family's still making power moves. In 2018, they sold a controlling stake in their retail business, Detsky Mir, for a cool $1 billion. It's like they looked at their billion-dollar loss and said, "Hold my caviar, I'm gonna make that back." Chemical kings. Try owning most of a region's chemical and oil processing sectors. The Shaimeevs aren't just rich, they control an entire Russian republic rich. But how'd they build an empire worth $285 billion without anyone noticing? Meet the Shaimeev family, the chemical kings of Tatarstan. These guys ain't playing around with small-time operations. They've got their hands on a fortune that'd make some small countries jealous. We're talking about $2.85 billion, all thanks to their company Taif. Now, Taif isn't your average business. This thing's a beast. It's got its fingers in everything from chemicals to oil processing in Tatarstan. It's like they looked at the region and said, "Yeah, we'll take all of that." But here's where it gets wild. The Shaimeevs didn't just buy up a few factories. They practically own the whole show in Tatarstan. We're talking about controlling most of the region's chemical and oil processing sectors. It's like they're playing Monopoly, but instead of Park Place and Boardwalk, they've got petrochemical plants and oil refineries. And get this, it all started with Papa Bear Mintimur Shaimeev. This guy was the first president of Tatarstan back in the day. Talk about connections, right? His sons, Erat and Radik, took that political clout and turned it into a chemical empire. Now you might be thinking, sure, they've got some factories, so what? But we're not just talking about a few plants here and there. Taif is responsible for producing 96% of Tatarstan's plastics and synthetic rubber. That's right, 96%. It's like they've got a monopoly on everything stretchy and bendy in the region. But the Shaimeevs ain't just about chemicals. They've got their hands in oil processing too. Taif's subsidiary, Taif NK, is one of the largest oil refineries in Russia. They're pumping out gasoline, diesel fuel, and jet fuel like it's going out of style. And here's the kicker. They're not just big in Tatarstan. Taif's products are exported to over 50 countries around the world. It's like they've turned this little Russian republic into a global chemical powerhouse. The Gutserievs. While some billionaires are content with oil fields, others are playing a real-life game of SimCity. The Gutserievs didn't just strike black gold, they're building a legacy that's part Rockefeller, part real estate tycoon. How do you turn crude oil into skyscrapers? Well, the Gutseriev family's sitting on a $3.2 billion fortune that's got more layers than a Russian nesting doll. These folks ain't just pumping oil. They're juggling coal, real estate, and enough business interests to make your head spin. At the heart of it all is Mikhail Gutseriev, the big boss of Rosneft. This guy's running an oil company that's got more wells than your average small town has, people. But here's where it gets wild. The Gutserievs ain't putting all their rubles in one barrel. They've got their fingers in everything from pension funds to supermarket chains. It's like they looked at the board game Monopoly and said, let's do that, but in real life. Now, you might be thinking, sure, they've got some businesses, so what? But we're not just talking about a few companies here and there. The Gutserievs have built an empire that's weathered storms that would sink most billionaires. Back in the 2000s, they lost a bunch of assets and Mikhail had to skip town for a bit. But did that stop them? Heck no. They bounced back harder than a rubber ball, buying back their company and growing their fortune even bigger. And get this, when the whole world was freaking out about COVID-19, the Gutserievs weren't just sitting on their piles of cash, they put their hotels to work, letting healthcare workers crash there. It's like they looked at a global crisis and said, hold my vodka, I'm gonna do some good. But the real kicker? Their real estate game. These folks have got prime properties that'd make your average real estate agent drool. We're talking about buildings in spots so hot you could fry an egg on the sidewalk. And even when the economy's doing the cha-cha, they're still holding on to these golden locations like a dog with a bone. The Gutserievs' story is like watching someone play a high-stakes game of Tetris with billion-dollar blocks. They're stacking up assets in oil, coal, and real estate, fitting them together in ways that'd make your head spin. It's not just about having a diverse portfolio, it's about building an empire that can take a hit and keep on ticking, fertilizing fortunes. The Gurievs figured out how to turn dirt into dollars, and now they're sitting on a $5.1 billion fortune. But here's the kicker. Their cash crop ain't what you'd expect. Meet the Guriev family, the fertilizer kings of Russia. These folks ain't just selling plant food, they're building an empire that'd make your average farmer's jaw drop. We're talking about Phosagro, one of the world's largest producers of phosphate-based fertilizers. It's like they looked at a pile of dirt and saw dollar signs. Now you might be thinking, fertilizer? Really? But we're not talking about the stuff you buy at your local garden center. Phosagro's pumping out high-grade phosphate rock and fertilizers faster than you can say bumper crop. They're supplying farmers in over 100 countries, helping feed the world while filling their bank accounts. But the Gurievs ain't just about making plants grow. They're growing their own money trees too. In London, of all places, these folks have been snapping up prime real estate in the British capital like it's going out of style. We're talking about properties worth millions, in neighborhoods where even the pigeons wear top hats. And get this, they've got a taste for the historic. The Gurievs dropped a cool £50 million on Whittenhurst, the second largest private residence in London after Buckingham Palace. It's like they looked at the Queen's digs and said, we'll take the next best thing. But here's where it gets wild. The Gurievs ain't just buying fancy houses to show off. Nah, they're playing the long game. London real estate's like a safety deposit box with a view. It's a way to park their fertilizer fortunes somewhere safe, just in case things get messy back home. Now, you might be wondering, how'd they get so rich from fertilizer? Well, it all started with Andrei Guriev Sr. This guy saw an opportunity when Russia was privatizing its industries in the 90s. He scooped up a chunk of what would become Phosagro and turned it into a global powerhouse. And the Gurievs ain't slowing down. They've been expanding Phosagro, building new plants and increasing production. It's like they're determined to corner the market on making things grow. From Russian fields to African farms, if there's a crop that needs a boost, chances are the Gurievs are involved. But it ain't all smooth sailing. The Gurievs have had their fair share of drama, including disputes over ownership and run-ins with the law. It's like they're living in a real-life soap opera, but with billion-dollar stakes, building bridges to billions. Meet the Rotenberg family, the infrastructure kings of Russia. These folks ain't just pouring concrete, they're building an empire that'd make your average construction boss's hard hat spin. We're talking about a fortune worth $5.45 billion, all thanks to their knack for landing juicy government contracts and infrastructure projects. Now you might be thinking, construction? Really? But we're not talking about your neighbor's home renovation here. The Rotenbergs are behind some of the biggest infrastructure projects in Russia. They're building roads, pipelines, and bridges that are changing the face of the country. But let's talk about that bridge for a sec. The Crimean Bridge, connecting Russia to the annexed Crimean Peninsula, ain't just any old bridge. This thing's a 12-mile-long behemoth that cost a whopping $3.7 billion to build. And who got the contract? That's right, the Rotenbergs. It's like they looked at the Black Sea and said, yeah, we can build over that. And get this, the bridge ain't just a feat of engineering. It's a political statement with a price tag that'd make most countries' budgets look like pocket change. The Rotenbergs didn't just build a bridge, they constructed a symbol of Russian power that's visible from space. But the Crimean Bridge is just the tip of the iceberg. The Rotenbergs have their fingers in more pies than a bakery. They've got contracts with Gazprom, Russia's state-owned gas giant, that are worth billions. It's like they've got a golden ticket to the Russian infrastructure lottery, and they keep winning. Now, you might be wondering, how'd they get so cozy with the government? Well, it helps to have friends in high places. Arkady Rotenberg, the family patriarch, just happens to be a childhood friend of Vladimir Putin. Talk about a valuable connection, right? But the Rotenbergs ain't just riding on connections. They've built a construction empire that's hard to ignore. Their company, Stroygazmontaj, was the biggest construction firm for the gas industry in Russia. We're talking about building thousands of miles of pipelines, enough to wrap around the earth a few times. And they're not just sticking to Russia. The Rotenbergs have projects all over the place, from Finland to Italy. If there's a big infrastructure project going down, chances are the Rotenbergs are involved somehow. The Gutseriev Empire. While the Rotenbergs were paving roads, another Russian family was drilling for black gold and erecting skyscrapers. The Gutserievs have built an empire worth $5.65 billion, but their story isn't just about oil and real estate. It's about a family that turns every business venture into a golden opportunity. Meet the extended Gutseriev clan, the masters of diversification in Russia's billionaire club. These folks ain't just rich, they're we own a bit of everything rich. With a fortune of $5.65 billion, they're playing a real-life game of Monopoly, where everyone's winning. At the heart of this empire is Mikhail Gutseriev, the big boss who's got more irons in the fire than a blacksmith's forge. This guy's running Rosneft, an oil company that's pumping out black gold like there's no tomorrow. But Mikhail ain't content with just one industry. Nah, he's got his fingers in more pies than a baker on overtime. The Gutserievs ain't just about oil. They've got their hands on coal, real estate, and even supermarket chains. It's like they looked at the Russian economy and said, we'll take a slice of everything, please. Their company, Safmar Group, is like a buffet of businesses, serving up a little bit of everything. But here's where it gets wild. The Gutserievs have seen more ups and downs than a roller coaster. Back in the 2000s, they lost a bunch of assets and Mikhail had to take an extended vacation abroad. Most folks would have thrown in the towel, but not the Gutserievs. They bounced back harder than a rubber ball in a concrete room. And get this, when they came back swinging. They bought back their company and started growing their empire even bigger. It's like they looked at their setbacks and said, hold my vodka, I'm gonna show you how it's done. Now you might be thinking, sure, they've got some businesses, so what? But we're not just talking about a few companies here and there. The Gutserievs have built an empire that spans across Russia and beyond. They've got oil fields in Siberia, office buildings in Moscow, and investments all over the place. And they ain't afraid to make big moves. In 2019, they merged their oil assets with those of Viktor Kharitonin, creating a new company called Fortinvest. That's like two titans of industry joining forces to create a super company. It's the kind of move that makes other billionaires sit up and take notice. But the Gutserievs ain't just about making money, they've got a softer side too. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they put their hotels to work, letting healthcare workers stay there for free. It's like they looked at a global crisis and said, we can help with that. The Gutseriev family story is like watching a high-stakes game of chess, but instead of pawns and knights, they're moving oil rigs and skyscrapers. It's not just about having a diverse portfolio, it's about building an empire that can take a hit and keep on growing. Golden touch. Ever wonder how close you need to be to the Kremlin to make $25 billion? The Timchenko family's fortune might just blow your mind. These folks ain't just rich, they control a significant chunk of Russia's gas industry. Rich. We're talking about a family that's turned political connections into a gas empire worth more than some small countries' entire economies. Meet Gennady Timchenko and his family, sitting on a cool $25 billion fortune, but they didn't strike it rich with tech or real estate. Nah, these folks made their billions from gas and petrochemicals. It's like they've got their own personal gas station, but instead of filling up cars, they're fueling entire industries. Now you might be thinking, sure, they've got some gas fields, so what? But we're not just talking about a few wells here and there. Timchenko co-founded Novatek, one of Russia's largest independent natural gas producers. This company's pumping out so much gas, it could probably keep your stove running for the next million years. But Timchenko ain't stopping at gas. He's also got his fingers in Cyber, a major petrochemical company. It's like he looked at the gas industry and said, yeah, I'll take that too. This guy's building an empire that stretches from the gas fields to the plastic factories. And get this, Timchenko's wealth is so massive, it's like owning an endless supply of the most expensive fuel on Earth. Imagine having so much gas, you could power a small country for decades. That's the kind of wealth we're talking about here. But here's where it gets wild. Timchenko ain't just a savvy businessman, he's got connections that'd make your average CEO jealous. We're talking about close ties to the Russian government, particularly President Vladimir Putin. It's like he's got a direct line to the Kremlin and it's been ringing off the hook with lucrative opportunities. These government connections have been like rocket fuel for Timchenko's businesses. They've helped him secure deals and expand his empire in ways that most people can only dream of. It's like he's playing Monopoly, but instead of buying Park Place, he's scooping up entire sectors of the Russian economy. Now, you might be wondering, how rich is $25 billion really? Well, let's put it this way. If you stacked up $25 billion in $100 bills, you'd have a tower higher than Mount Everest. That's the kind of wealth we're dealing with here. But the Timchenko family ain't just sitting on their pile of cash. They've been using their wealth to weather some pretty serious storms. In 2024, Timchenko was ranked as the third richest person in Russia, even after facing international sanctions. It's like he's got a financial force field protecting his fortune. And here's the kicker. The Timchenko family's wealth has actually been growing thanks to high commodity prices in recent years. While some billionaires were watching their fortunes shrink, these folks were seeing their bank accounts swell. It's like they've cracked the code on how to make money in any economic climate. But let's be real for a sec. In Russia, wealth and politics are often two sides of the same coin. Timchenko's close relationship with the Kremlin is a perfect example of how political connections can turbocharge business success in the country. It's not just about what you know, it's about who you know. Steel magnate supreme. While some billionaires collect cars or real estate, the Lysins collect steel mills. But we're not talking about a hobbyist's collection here. This family's got enough metal to make Iron Man jealous. Ever wonder what it's like to have 26 billion worth of steel at your fingertips? Meet Vladimir Lysin and his family, the steel magnates who've turned iron ore into a fortune that'd make your average millionaire look like they're playing with monopoly money. We're talking about a net worth of $26 billion, all built on the back of Novolipetsk Steel, one of Russia's largest steel producers. Now you might be thinking, steel? That's not very exciting. But hold up, Lysin's company ain't just churning out a few beams here and there. Novolipetsk Steel is a beast in the global market. We're talking about a company that's seen its stock price shoot up by 110% in just 1 year. That's like buying a $100 stock and watching it turn into $210 faster than you can say metal. But here's where it gets wild. The scale of Novolipetsk Steel's production is so massive, it's hard to wrap your head around. Imagine having enough steel to build skyscrapers in every major city. That's the kind of production we're dealing with here. It's like Lysin's got his own personal Stark Industries, minus the arc reactor. And Lysin ain't new to this game. He started out working for a group of traders that dominated Russia's aluminum and steel exports. It's like he went to the School of Metal and graduated with flying colors. In 2000, he saw his chance and snatched up Novolipetsk Steel. Talk about a smart investment. Fast forward to 2024 and Lysin's sitting pretty as the second richest person in Russia. But he ain't just relying on steel. The family's got their fingers in the aluminum pie too. It's like they looked at the periodic table and decided to corner the market on metals. To give you an idea of just how much steel we're talking about, let's do a little comparison. The Empire State Building used about 60,000 tons of steel in its construction. Now imagine building multiple Empire State Buildings every single day. That's the kind of production capacity we're dealing with here.